a complete liar. He is a sex addict.
Hulk Hogan may have passed away a legend at 71, but behind the muscles and fame was a tangled trail of scandals, from secretly sleeping with his best friend's wife to controversies that forever stained his larger-than-life image.
I let my best friend, my hot wife.
From crossing the line with his daughter's best friend to shocking scandals that few could have imagined. Here are 6 times Hulk Hogan went way too far with women. And the first story begins with the woman who knew him longer and more intimately than anyone else, his first wife, Linda. Their relationship wasn't just a marriage that fell apart. It was, according to Linda, decades of abuse, control, and betrayal that shattered their family. Linda met Hogan in 1977, and they married in 1983 during the peak of his rising fame. To the outside world, they looked like the perfect wrestling power couple, the all-American hero and his glamorous wife raising 2 children, Brooke and Nick, while living the dream. But Linda's explosive 2011 memoir, Wrestling the Hulk, revealed a much darker reality. She accused Hogan of physical abuse, including choking and throwing objects, and described him as a sex addict whose controlling behavior tore their family apart. What makes Linda's story even more heartbreaking is that the damage from their marriage still echoes through the family today. In March 2025, just months before Hogan's death, Linda posted a tearful video on social media that went viral for all the wrong reasons, showing her completely breaking down as she spoke about the ongoing destruction within their family.
It's been 15 or longer years since I met Hulk Hogan, and my family is in the worst mess.
But Linda didn't stop there in what can only be described as a raw and unfiltered moment of pain. She went even further, opening up about the depth of her suffering and the scars that never truly healed.
A complete liar. He is a sex addict.
What stands out most in Linda's account is that it doesn't describe just a few isolated incidents, but rather a long pattern of control and manipulation. In her memoir, she accused Hogan of monitoring her every move and cutting her off from friends and family, classic signs of emotional abuse, where power and control are used to dominate a partner. The financial settlement from their 2009 divorce also tells its own story. Linda walked away with 70% of their liquid assets and 40% of Hogan's companies, totaling around $710 million, unusually large settlement that often hints at serious wrongdoing by the other party. But perhaps the most damning evidence of Hogan's treatment of Linda comes from the reaction of their children. Brooke has cut off contact with both parents, refusing to attend Hogan's 2023 wedding and keeping her distance for years, a painful sign that the dysfunction in this family went far beyond a typical divorce. What makes Linda's story even more tragic is Hogan's reaction to her emotional breakdown in 2025. Instead of showing empathy or taking responsibility, he posted a video of himself with his current wife eating popcorn, mocking her pain. That cruel response wasn't just indifferent, it was openly malicious. Linda's story doesn't read like one failed marriage. It paints the picture of a man who allegedly used his fame, his physical presence, and his financial power to control and intimidate the woman who should have been his equal partner. Linda's claims of being called names, having objects thrown at her, and being emotionally manipulated painted a disturbing picture of domestic abuse that lasted for more than 2 decades. If Linda's story revealed the private hell of being married to Hulk Hogan, then Heather Clem's story showed just how far Hogan was willing to go to satisfy his own desires, regardless of the consequences for the women involved. Heather Clem, who was married to radio DJ Todd Bubba the Love. Sponge had consensual sexual encounters with Hogan between 2006 and 2007. What should have remained a private matter between adults exploded into one of the biggest celebrity scandals of the 2010s when Gawker Media leaked excerpts of secretly recorded sex tapes in 2012. But Hogan's behavior in this scandal raised serious questions. According to court testimonies and multiple reports, the entire situation had been orchestrated by Bubba himself, who essentially offered his wife to Hogan as a twisted act of friendship. Bubba even admitted in interviews that he told Heather to take care of my boy after they returned from a strip club, reducing her to an object rather than respecting her as a partner with her own choices. What makes this even more unsettling is how Hogan later described the affair, claiming Heather was the one relentlessly pursuing him. That explanation ignores the obvious power dynamics here. Was one of the most famous wrestlers in the world, vulnerable yet influential, being offered sexual access to his best friend's wife. The idea that Heather was the aggressive pursuer strains credibility and highlights just how messy and troubling this situation really was.
I let my best friend, my hot wife.
But the real damage to Heather came when the tapes were made public. In her 2015 deposition, she revealed she never consented to being filmed, felt humiliated by the exposure, and had even begged Bubba to destroy the recordings. Imagine that your most intimate moment secretly taped, then blasted across the internet for the world to consume. And the scandal wasn't just about sex. The tapes also caught Hogan making racist remarks about his daughter Brooke dating black men, a revelation that led to his temporary removal from the WWE Hall of Fame in 2015 and shattered his image as a family-friendly icon. What made matters worse was Hogan's response. Instead of acknowledging the harm done to Heather, he quickly distanced himself, painting her and Bubba as the masterminds behind the setup and casting himself as the victim. This kind of victim blaming is textbook manipulation, shifting blame onto the people who were actually exploited. The fallout destroyed Heather's life. She divorced Bubba in 2012 and lost both her marriage and her privacy in one devastating blow. Hogan, meanwhile, walked away with a massive payday after suing Gawker, securing a $140 million judgment later settled for $31 million. In the end, Heather was left with shame and broken trust, while Hogan turned his scandal into yet another twisted victory. The Heather Clem scandal turned her life upside down, yet somehow Hogan managed to benefit from it, which perfectly shows a pattern seen many times in his relationships with women, where he sought his own pleasure while avoiding responsibility for the damage left behind. And Heather became nothing more than collateral damage in his selfish choices, forced to live with the wreckage while Hogan walked away and even profited from the chaos. But if Heather's story was painful, the one involving Christiane Plant took things to a far deeper level of betrayal, because it showed just how far Hogan was willing to cross boundaries, even at the cost of his own family. This was not just another case of infidelity. It was a direct wound to the heart of his daughter's trust and respect, proving how little regard he had for the women closest to him. Christiane Plant was 33 years old and closely involved in Brooke Hogan's 2006 album when she began an affair with Hogan, who was in his mid-50s at the time, and the impact of that decision would shake the Hogan family in ways few could imagine. The timing of the affair could not have been worse, as it happened while Hogan and Linda's marriage was already falling apart, and at the very moment when Brooke trusted Christiane Plant not only as a professional partner, but also as a close friend. What makes this affair especially shocking is the depth of betrayal involved, because Plant was not some random woman Hogan happened to meet. She was someone invited into their family circle, someone who worked side by side with his daughter, and someone trusted with access to their personal lives. Even though the affair began while Hogan and Linda were separated, the emotional toll it took on Brooke was devastating. In 2008, Christiane Plant publicly confessed in an interview with the National Enquirer, directly apologizing to Brooke for breaking her trust and admitting the betrayal. The fact that she felt the need to issue a public apology says everything about how inappropriate the relationship truly was. Yet, while Plant accepted responsibility for her part, Hogan chose a very different path, denying the affair in his memoir even while hinting at suspicions of infidelity, once again showing the same pattern of denial and deflection that so often marked his treatment of women. Even when faced with undeniable evidence, Hogan refused to take full responsibility, and the effect on Brooke was both deep and lasting, as she immediately severed ties with Plant, calling the affair a betrayal in a now-deleted MySpace post. For a young woman just beginning to carve out her place in the music world, being betrayed by someone she trusted on both a personal and professional level was nothing short of devastating. What makes this entire situation even more disturbing are the power dynamics at play, because Hogan was not just any man, but a global icon with wealth, fame, and influence, pursuing someone who was financially and professionally tied to his family, leaving Plant in a position where saying no could have meant jeopardizing her career. This is a textbook example of how power and influence can be abused to pursue sexual relationships. The age gap only makes things worse, since at 33, Plant was closer in age to Brooke than to Hogan, which made the betrayal sting even more. Reports even suggested that Hogan discussed wanting to have a child with Plant to carry on his legacy, a revelation that adds a deeply unsettling layer to the situation and makes it clear this was not just some fleeting affair, but something he may have considered as a way to replace his family with a younger version. The fallout from the Plant affair highlights yet another recurring pattern in Hogan's behavior, seeking gratification and control, while leaving emotional wreckage behind for others to clean up when his actions damaged his relationships. Instead of taking responsibility and trying to fix things, he would just move on and act like nothing had ever happened. Brooke's distance from her father, which continues to this day, can be traced back to this betrayal. Rather than valuing his bond with his daughter, Hogan chose to put his own desires first, and the family has never recovered from it. The Christian Plant affair clearly showed what was wrong with Hogan's way of handling relationships with women: the misuse of power, the disregard for family ties, the refusal to take responsibility, and the belief that others should simply accept his behavior without consequences. It is a clear example of how one man's selfishness and entitlement can destroy many lives and relationships at the same time. Out of all the stories being discussed today, the most disturbing one involves Hulk Hogan's own daughter, Brooke. This is not just about inappropriate behavior toward women in general. It is about a father whose actions toward his own child crossed lines that should never be crossed, creating a situation that was not only uncomfortable, but, according to recent claims, also abusive. The troubling nature of Hogan's relationship with Brooke has been noticed and discussed for years. Public photos showed Hogan applying suntan lotion to her body in ways that made people uneasy, and he was often caught making comments about her perfect body. These were not isolated moments, but repeated actions that many found disturbing.
Honestly, Heather was relentless. I want to see your thing. I want to F you.
Right.
On and on and on. I mean,
Right. But I don't
see him, or when I'd be on the phone with Bubba, she'd grab the phone. And his wife was gorgeous, and she kept saying, I want to get with you. I want to do this and that and the other stuff, and I want to have sex with you. And I said, no, 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 no. So at the end of the day, I kind of bottomed out, I was with my boy, We went back to the house, and when I was at my all-time low, I just said, the hell with it. Let's do this thing.
They showed a pattern of behavior that repeatedly crossed the line between normal fatherly affection and something far more disturbing. The real extent of this inappropriate relationship came out in the sex tape recordings with Heather Klim, where Hogan could be heard making racist remarks about Brooke's dating life, using slurs while talking about her relationships with black men. The fact that he was thinking about and openly discussing his own daughter's sexuality in such explicit and racist terms during an intimate moment with another woman revealed a level of obsession that went far beyond normal parental concern. The media and entertainment industry had already picked up on these uncomfortable dynamics years earlier, with many outlets describing Hogan's behavior toward Brooke as creepy, damaging the family man image he tried to maintain. When professional journalists are openly calling a father's behavior with his daughter creepy, that in itself is a huge warning sign. But what came out in 2025 showed that this behavior was only the beginning. In March 2025, after her mother Linda's emotional breakdown video, Brooke finally broke her silence about what really happened inside the Hogan household. In a powerful Instagram post, she revealed that she had been subjected to severe verbal and mental abuse since childhood, and that this abuse often turned physical. This revelation changes the way we look at the Hogan family dynamic. What the public once saw as an overly close and inappropriate father-daughter relationship was, according to Brooke, actually an abusive situation that left her with lasting psychological damage. In her statement, Brooke said, "I've set boundaries that were not respected, and at this point, I can truly do no more." These words about boundaries not being respected are very telling, as they suggest she tried many times to create healthy limits with her father, only for those boundaries to be ignored again and again. The fact that Brooke has had no contact with her father for years, even skipping his 2023 wedding, speaks volumes about the seriousness of what happened between them. She has built a new life for herself, getting married in 2022 and welcoming twins in 2025, all without her father's involvement. When someone completely cuts a parent out of important life events like a wedding or the birth of grandchildren, it signals trauma that goes far beyond normal family disagreements. What makes Brooke's situation even more tragic is how her father's public image as a family man was so different from what was allegedly happening behind closed doors. While Hogan was presenting himself as a loving and protective father on their reality show, Hogan Knows Best, Brooke was apparently living through something very different. The pattern of behavior she describes, verbal and mental abuse that sometimes turned physical, along with constant boundary violations, fits the classic signs of family abuse. When we combine this with Hogan's inappropriate public behavior and obsessive comments about Brooke's body and relationships, it paints a picture of a father whose connection with his daughter was deeply harmful and dysfunctional. Perhaps the most heartbreaking part is that when Linda broke down in her recent video about the family's destruction, Brooke explained that she had completely separate reasons for cutting off contact with each of her parents. This suggests that whatever Hogan did to his daughter was so serious that even her mother's own abuse wasn't enough for Brooke to side with Linda against him. Moving on to Jennifer McDaniel, while her story may seem less dramatic than others we've covered, it reveals something important about Hogan's recurring behavior with women and his apparent inability to maintain healthy, long-term relationships, even when given a fresh start and every opportunity to change. Jennifer McDaniel, a makeup artist born in 1974, began dating Hogan shortly after his divorce from Linda was finalized. At 36, she was significantly younger than Hogan, who was 57 when they married in 2010. For many observers, this marriage seemed like Hogan's chance to start over and show that he had learned from the mistakes of his first marriage, and the early years of their relationship initially seemed to support this hope. Unlike his tumultuous relationship with Linda, Hogan's marriage to Jennifer was notably quiet. There were no major public scandals, no abuse allegations, and no dramatic breakdowns. To someone following his personal life, it might have seemed like he had finally found peace and stability. But this calm was telling in its own way. The lack of drama didn't necessarily mean Hogan had changed his behavior toward women. It could simply mean that Jennifer was more tolerant, more private about any issues, or that Hogan had become more careful about keeping his behavior out of the public eye. The marriage lasted 11 years, ending quietly in 2021 when Hogan filed for divorce in October and finalized it by December. What stands out about the end of this marriage is how casually Hogan announced it. In February 2022, he posted on social media that he was divorced and already dating someone new, treating the end of an 11-year marriage as if it were no more significant than changing his breakfast routine. The casual way he announced the divorce reveals his attitude toward relationships with women. He described it with a war is over mentality, suggesting that even this supposedly peaceful marriage had become something he saw as a conflict to be won, rather than a partnership to be valued. This choice of words is significant because it shows that even in what seemed like his most successful relationship, Hogan still treated marriage as a battle rather than a partnership. The timing of his new relationship is also revealing. He announced his new girlfriend Sky almost immediately after announcing his divorce and was seen buying her a car. Based on the divorce settlement, this quick move suggests Hogan may have already been emotionally or physically involved with someone else before his marriage to Jennifer officially ended. Jennifer's story is particularly sad because it fits the larger pattern of Hogan's relationships. She gave him 11 years of her life, during what should have been her prime years for starting a family and building a career. She had no children with Hogan, and according to the divorce settlement, received no alimony, only a one-time payment. So, after 11 years of marriage to one of the wealthiest wrestlers in history, she was essentially sent away with a severance package. The pattern we see with Jennifer McDaniel is what relationship experts call serial monogamy, moving from one committed relationship to another without ever addressing the problems that caused the previous one to fail. Public reactions included jokes about Hogan's serial monogamy and comments about it being a forgotten era of his life, showing how quickly people came to expect instability in his relationships. What makes the Jennifer McDaniel marriage especially telling is that it happened during the time when Hogan should have been most motivated to prove he could change. This came after his explosive divorce from Linda, the sex tape scandal, the exposure of his racist comments, and even his temporary removal from the WWE Hall of Fame. If there was ever a time when Hogan should have been on his best behavior and focused on personal growth, it was during his marriage to Jennifer. The fact that even this fresh start ultimately failed and ended in such a casual, dismissive way suggests that Hogan's problems with relationships aren't just situational, they are part of his character. Jennifer McDaniel was his best chance to show he could treat a woman with respect and maintain a healthy, long-term relationship. Yet that opportunity was wasted. Moving on to Dolly Parton, our final story takes us back to the 1980s and involves one of country music's most beloved icons. While this incident may seem less serious than the others, it reveals something important about Hogan's attitude toward women and how his need to brag about sexual conquests led him to create elaborate and degrading fantasies about female celebrities. The story comes from Hogan's multiple appearances on Howard Stern's radio show from the 1980s into the 2020s, where he repeatedly claimed that Dolly Parton had propositioned him for a threesome on a mountain. He also said that Parton personally invited him to appear in her 1987 music video for Headlock on My Heart, suggesting that this invitation was sexual in nature, to be clear. Here's what really happened versus what Hogan claimed. Dolly Parton and Hulk Hogan did work together on the Headlock on My Heart video in 1987, which included a playful wrestling ring wedding scene between the two. This was a legitimate professional collaboration, fitting with Hogan's wrestling fame and Parton's history of working with various entertainers. But Hogan didn't stop there. He added sexual fantasy details to the story that Parton never confirmed, fitting what entertainment journalists have described as his pattern of bizarre lies about female celebrities. He made similar claims about other famous women, including stories that he had turned down advances from Bette Midler, creating a string of boastful tales that painted him as irresistibly attractive to female celebrities. The problem with these stories isn't just that they are likely false. It's what they show about Hogan's mindset toward women. In each story, Hogan casts himself as the one with all the power and control. The women are always shown as the sexual aggressors, desperate for his attention, while he positions himself as the virtuous man who could have any woman he wanted but chooses to be faithful. This narrative serves several troubling purposes. First, these stories fed Hogan's ego by making him seem universally desirable. Second, they gave him a defense against claims of infidelity. After all, if he was always turning down advances from famous, beautiful women, how could he be the one pursuing inappropriate relationships? Third, and most troubling, they reduced accomplished women to sexual objects whose main purpose was to prove his attractiveness. The Dolly Parton story is especially offensive because she has spent her career fighting to be taken seriously as a businesswoman, songwriter, and entertainer in an industry that often focused only on her looks. For Hogan to invent sexual fantasies about her and share them publicly shows a complete lack of respect for her achievements and dignity. These stories were part of what the media later called Hogan's lying scandal, a clear pattern of making up stories that were later proven false. The fact that he felt the need to create detailed sexual fantasies about famous women and present them as real reveals a deep desire to dominate and possess women, even if only in his imagination. The timing of these stories is also important. Hogan told them during the same periods he was allegedly abusing Linda, cheating with Christian Plant, and engaging in the behavior that led to the sex tape scandal. So while he was publicly bragging about turning down advances from celebrities, he was privately treating the real women in his life very badly. This pattern of behavior creating false stories that make him look like a sexual conquest while mistreating real women reveals the deep, disconnect in Hogan's relationships with women. He wanted all the ego boost and social status that came from being seen as sexually desirable, but he avoided any responsibility that came with actually treating women with respect and dignity. The Dolly Parton story may seem like harmless celebrity gossip compared to allegations of abuse and affairs, but it actually gives important insight into Hogan's mindset toward women. It shows a man who saw female celebrities not as accomplished people deserving respect, but as trophies to add to his imagined collection of sexual conquests. That's it for this video, but don't go anywhere. We've got plenty more heat for you. Just tap any of the cards on your screen right now and stay tuned.